They called it Moria, the Black Pit, a place of endless dark, haunted by goblins and a nameless terror. To Frodo Baggins and the Fellowship of the Ring, it was a tomb, a shortcut through the mountains that nearly cost them everything. But this realm of shadow was not always so. Before the darkness, it had another name: Khazad-dûm, the great mansion of the dwarves. It was the mightiest kingdom they ever built. So what happened? How did a wonder of the world become a place of dread? This is the story of the glory, the greed, and the doom of Khazad-dûm. Our story begins long before the sun and moon, in the years of the trees. The father of the Longbeards, Durin the First, awoke alone under Mount Gundabad. He wandered south along the misty mountains until he came upon a valley with a breathtaking lake. He called it the Mirror Mere. When he looked into its waters, he saw a crown of stars reflected around his head, even in the daylight. He took this as a sign, and that crown of stars never faded. For ages after, anyone who looked into the Mirror Mere would see it gleaming in the deep, a constant reminder of the city's faded glory. Durin founded Khazad-dûm, and it grew into the greatest mansion of their race. Its architects achieved wonders: the second hall, vast and pillared, the endless stair, which spiraled from the deepest dungeon to the highest peak, and the slender Bridge of Khazad-dûm, a masterpiece of defensive engineering. But do not picture a dark and gloomy cavern. In its prime, Khazad-dûm was a city of light. The dwarves were masters of their craft, carving shafts to catch the distant sunlight and starlight, and using immense crystals and mirrors to cast a permanent, brilliant twilight through their halls. The very walls were polished to a gleam, reflecting the light of 1,000 lamps. Then, they found it. Deep in the rock, they discovered a silver-bright metal, as light as a feather but harder than steel. They named it Mithril. It was found nowhere else in Middle-earth, and it made the dwarves of Khazad-dûm fabulously wealthy and powerful. For a time, this was a golden age. They traded with men and forged an unlikely friendship with the elves of the neighboring realm of Eregion. The elf lord Celebrimbor, the very same smith who would forge the Rings of Power, and the dwarf craftsman Narvi became great friends. Together, they built the famous West Gate of Moria. The password to open it, Melon, the elvish word for friend, was a symbol of the trust between their people. But this age of prosperity could not last. In the east, the Dark Lord Sauron was rising. He grew to hate the dwarves of Khazad-dûm for their strength and defiance. When the Rings of Power were forged, Durin the Third, king of Khazad-dûm, received one of the 7 rings given to the dwarf lords. But Sauron's treachery was soon revealed, and the War of the Elves and Sauron erupted. Eregion was destroyed, and the dwarves of Khazad-dûm sealed their West Gate forever. Their friendship with the elves was broken. Their numbers began to dwindle. Cut off from the world, they turned their gaze inward and downward. Their search for Mithril became an obsession. But their search for Mithril was more than just ambition. It had become a hoarding sickness. For the Ring of Power given to Durin's line was at work, amplifying their natural desires, stoking the fires of their greed until it burned away all caution. They tunneled into places men had never dreamed of, but in their arrogance, they forgot that they were not the first to carve paths in the deep earth. They broke into tunnels not of their own making, where nameless things, creatures older and fouler than orcs, had been gnawing at the world since its creation. In the year 1980 of the Third Age, they delved too greedily and too deep. They awoke something that had slept in the earth since the dawn of time, a shadow of flame and death, a Balrog of Morgoth. The creature rose and wreaked havoc. It slew King Durin the Sixth and his son after him, earning the name Durin's Bane. The dwarves fought valiantly, but they were no match for such an ancient evil. The survivors fled their ancestral home, and the great halls of Khazad-dûm fell silent. It was then that its name changed. It was no longer the Dwarven, the great mansion. It became Moria, the Black Pit. The empty halls did not remain so for long. Orcs from the misty mountains, drawn by the darkness, crept in and began to worship the Balrog. Sauron sent more foul creatures there, and Moria became a festering hive of evil, ruled by the chieftain Azog. Over the centuries, the dwarves tried to reclaim their lost home. Thror, grandfather of Thorin Oakenshield, attempted to enter alone and was slain by Azog, sparking the bloody war of the dwarves and orcs. Years later, another attempt was made. You might remember him from the Fellowship of the Hobbit, Balin. In 2989, he led a colony of dwarves back to Moria. For 5 years, it seemed they might succeed, but the orcs were too numerous. The colony was overwhelmed and destroyed. Their last stand was in the chamber of Mazarbul, the very room where the Fellowship would later find Balin's tomb. Mats, this brings us to the events of the Lord of the Rings. And for one member of the Fellowship, this was not just a dangerous shortcut. For Gimli, son of Gloin, this was a homecoming. He arrived at the gates full of hope, eager to receive a royal welcome from his cousin Balin. But as they journeyed deeper, his hope turned to a cold, growing dread. The Fellowship enters, discovers the tragic fate of Balin's company, and is pursued by the Balrog. On the bridge he helped design, Gandalf makes his stand, shattering both the bridge and his foe, and falling with it into the abyss. After the fall of Sauron and the end of the War of the Ring, Moria remained a dark and dangerous place. As Gimli himself noted, dark places still need a lot of cleaning up. The Balrog was gone, but the orcs remained. For many years, the great kingdom lay empty of dwarves, but a prophecy had spoken of a final coming of Durin, who would lead his people back to their rightful home. And in the Fourth Age, he came. Durin the Seventh, known as Durin the Last. He gathered his people and led the final return to their ancestral city. This time, they were successful. After centuries of silence, broken only by the shrieks of orcs, a new sound echoed in the deeps. It was the ringing of hammers on anvils. It was the song of the dwarves, returned at last. The forges were relit, and light and life returned to the heart of the mountain. The dwarves, it is said, remained there until the world grew old and their days were ended. Yeah, I see. So while we remember Moria for the terror the Fellowship faced, its story did not end in darkness. It is a tale of loss, yes, but also one of enduring hope and the unyielding determination of the dwarves to finally return home. The world of Middle-earth is filled with incredible architecture, from the graceful towers of the elves to the mighty fortresses of Gondor. So my question for you is, which race had the best architectural style? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into Middle-earth's lore, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. It makes a huge difference for the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Scarlet Reveries.